Blackwood Academy, Part 7. Alistair's blood hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the low, guttural thrum emanating from the Blackthorn. The chamber, once merely oppressive, now felt like the very maw of hell, its ancient stones vibrating with a dark, hungry energy. Professor Eldrin stood before the spire, his back to them, a silhouette of malevolent power. His arms were outstretched, fingers splayed, drawing the Blackthorn's essence into himself with an almost obscene greed. The air crackled, thick with ozone and the metallic tang of fear. Julian, his face a mask of grim determination, gripped Alistair's arm. The touch, usually a spark of antagonism, now felt like a lifeline, a shared anchor in the churning chaos. He's trying to merge with it. Julian's voice was strained, barely audible above the rising crescendo of the spire. He thinks he can control it, Alistair scoffed, a dry, bitter sound that felt out of place amidst the encroaching doom. Control the Blackthorn? He's a fool. It consumes everything in its path. The truth of his own ancestors' ambition, the horrifying vision of destruction, still clawed at his mind. He knew, with a chilling certainty, what Eldrin was unleashing. From Eldrin's outstretched hands, tendrils of shadow, darker than any night, snaked towards the walls, seeking purchase, trying to expand the Blackthorn's reach beyond the chamber. The ancient protective wards, woven into the very fabric of Blackwood, flared intermittently, struggling against the assault. They were failing, slowly but surely. "We have to stop him," Julian declared, his blue eyes blazing with a fierce resolve that mirrored the flickering light of his own magic. A faint, golden aura began to emanate from him, pushing back against the encroaching darkness, if only by inches. It was a desperate, beautiful defiance. Suddenly, a wave of raw power slammed into them, throwing Alistair against a cold stone pillar. Julian stumbled, but his grip on Alistair's arm remained unbroken. The binding spell, a cruel joke of fate, now pulsed with a terrifying intensity, amplifying every throb of the Blackthorn, every surge of Eldrin's corrupted magic. Alistair felt Julian's pain, a sharp, searing agony, and knew Julian felt his own. Eldrin turned, a triumphant, almost grotesque smile twisting his features. His eyes, usually sharp and calculating, were now pools of inky black, devoid of pupils, reflecting the Blackthorn's power. "Too late, boys." His voice echoed, deepened, distorted. "The great conjunction is upon us. Blackwood will be reborn, cleansed of its weakness, reshaped in true power." Alistair gritted his teeth, the taste of blood in his mouth. He focused, not on Eldrin's taunts, but on the sensation of Julian's hand on his arm, the unexpected comfort in that shared contact. The chaotic darkness within him, once a source of terror, now began to stir, responding to the Blackthorn's call, but also to Julian's steady light. It was a dangerous dance, a delicate balance. "We are not giving up," Julian snarled, his golden light flaring brighter, pushing Eldrin back a step. The very air around them vibrated with the clash of their opposing wills. It was more than just magic now. It was a battle of ideals, of inherited burdens, of the very essence of their intertwined bloodlines. Alistair felt the familiar surge of his own volatile magic, a cold, hungry power that mirrored the Blackthorn's. But this time, instead of fearing it, instead of letting it consume him, he reached for it, consciously. He saw the path his ancestor had taken, the path of domination, and he recoiled from it. He would not repeat that mistake. He would forge his own path, even if it meant risking everything. He pushed forward, drawing on the chaotic energy, not to feed the Blackthorn, but to meet it, to understand its language. Dark tendrils of his own magic, shimmering with an almost oily sheen, erupted from his hands, coiling around Julian's golden light. Instead of clashing, they intertwined, a swirling vortex of shadow and brilliance, a dangerous, beautiful fusion that pulsed with a power neither of them had ever wielded alone. Eldrin's triumphant smile faltered. He watched, eyes narrowed, as the combined force of their magic pushed against his own. Impossible! The prophecy spoke of shadow and light entwined, but never in harmony. His voice was laced with a sudden, dawning fear. "Harmony is overrated," Alistair gasped, straining, his muscles screaming. He felt Julian's unspoken agreement, a flicker of sardonic amusement even in the midst of their desperate struggle. The binding spell, now a conduit for their combined power, thrummed with incredible force, threatening to tear them apart even as it bound them closer. Julian, his brow furrowed in concentration, met Alistair's gaze. "We have to sever his connection to the Blackthorn, together." The words were a command, a plea, and an acknowledgement of their newfound terrifying interdependence. They moved as one, a seamless, impossible dance of opposing forces. Alistair's dark magic, usually untamed and destructive, became a focused spear of shadow, guided by Julian's steady light. Julian's radiant energy, typically contained and precise, now pulsed with a raw, almost wild intensity, amplified by Alistair's chaotic power. It was like trying to harness a hurricane with a silken thread, a testament to the strength of their unwilling bond. The Blackthorn roared, a sound that vibrated through their bones, a primal scream of awakened fury. It pulsed faster, growing brighter, its dark heart threatening to explode. Eldrin shrieked, his body arching, veins standing out on his neck as he fought to maintain his hold. He was a conductor, desperately trying to control an orchestra of destruction, but two rogue instruments had joined the chorus, playing their own defiant melody. "He's drawing power from the Academy's ley lines," Julian yelled, his voice ragged. "We need to cut him off." Alistair closed his eyes, pushing past the pain, past the fear, past the ingrained cynicism. He felt the intricate web of Blackwood's magic, the ancient conduits Eldrin was exploiting. He saw the subtle pathways, the hidden veins of power that fed the Blackthorn. His own chaotic magic, attuned to disruption, was uniquely suited to unraveling such a network. With a surge of desperate will, Alistair focused his darkness not on attacking Eldrin directly, but on the magical threads that connected Eldrin to the Academy's heart. He felt Julian's light, a guiding beacon, pushing against his own shadow, shaping it, giving it purpose. It was a symbiotic struggle, a delicate balance of push and pull, a profound sense of connection. Far deeper than any physical touch flowed between them. It was the understanding of shared purpose, of mutual risk, of a bond forged in the crucible of impending doom. The animosity, the inherited hatred had been burned away, leaving behind a raw, undeniable intimacy. Eldrin let out a guttural scream as the connections began to snap, one by one. The tendrils of shadow that had been reaching for the walls recoiled, his power flickering. The Blackthorn, deprived of its fuel, wavered, its malevolent glow dimming slightly. "Now!" Julian roared, and together they unleashed a final, concentrated burst of their combined magic. It was a paradox, a controlled explosion of chaotic darkness and radiant light, aimed not at destroying the Blackthorn, but at sealing it. Alistair visualized the ancient wards, the protective runes he'd seen in the texts, and Julian amplified that vision with his own mastery of protective charms. The magic hit the Blackthorn like a tidal wave, not to break it, but to bind it. Runes, ancient and powerful, flared into existence on the spire's obsidian surface, glowing with the combined light and shadow of their magic. They pulsed, contracting, drawing the Blackthorn's raw power inward, containing it, silencing its hungry thrum. Eldrin shrieked, a sound of pure agony and defeat, as his connection to the spire was violently severed. He collapsed, a crumpled heap on the floor, the blackness in his eyes receding to reveal a desperate, defeated human. The Blackthorn pulsed once more, a final shuddering beat, then fell silent, its malevolent glow fading, leaving only a faint, eerie luminescence. The binding spell connecting Alistair and Julian snapped, a sharp, almost physical sensation of something tearing. They both gasped, the sudden absence of the other's emotions, a strange, dizzying emptiness. Alistair felt a profound exhaustion settle over him, his limbs heavy, his mind reeling. He stumbled, catching himself on the pillar, his dark magic receding, leaving him feeling hollowed out. Julian, equally drained, sank to his knees, his golden aura flickering out like a dying flame. His eyes met Alistair's across the chamber, a shared understanding passing between them, a silent acknowledgement of the crucible they had just endured. The rivalry, the hatred, had been burned away, replaced by something far more complex, far more dangerous, and undeniably, profoundly real. They had faced their inherited past, not by repeating it, but by forging a new, terrifying path together. The silence in the chamber was deafening, broken only by Eldrin's ragged breathing. The air still hummed with residual magic, a faint echo of the power they had wielded. Alistair looked at the now dormant Blackthorn, then back at Julian. The fight was over, but the true battle, the one for their future, had only just begun. The lingering taste of Julian's fear, his resolve, his very essence, still clung to Alistair, a phantom limb of their shared existence, and he wondered with a chilling certainty if it would ever truly leave him. The silence that followed Professor Eldrin's collapse was a physical weight, pressing down on Alistair and Julian. The air in the Forbidden Archives, once thick with crackling dark energy and the frantic thrum of the Blackthorn, now felt strangely hollow. Eldrin lay sprawled amidst the shattered wards and arcane symbols, his dark vestments a stark contrast to the dust motes dancing in the slivers of moonlight filtering through the high, grimy windows. His breathing was shallow, ragged, the fanatic fire in his eyes extinguished, replaced by a dull, vacant stare. Alistair felt a profound exhaustion settle into his bones, a weariness that went beyond the physical. The fight had been brutal, a chaotic dance of raw, untamed power and desperate, calculated warding. He still tasted ozone on his tongue and the metallic tang of his own fear. His muscles ached, and a throbbing pain resonated behind his eyes, a phantom echo of the magical feedback that had coursed through him. He glanced at Julian, who stood a few feet away, equally disheveled, his impeccable golden hair now streaked with grime, his usually pristine uniform torn at the shoulder. Julian's blue eyes, usually so cold and assessing, held a similar vacant shock, his chest heaving with exertion. Slowly, the throbbing pulse that had connected them, a vibrant, terrifying conduit of shared magic and raw emotion, began to recede. It was a gradual fading, like a distant heartbeat slowing, then dissolving into nothingness. Alistair felt a strange, almost painful emptiness bloom in his chest. A sudden void where an intense, undeniable presence had been. The magical bond, the very thing that had bound them together in a dance of rivalry and undeniable attraction, was dissolving. It was a release, certainly, but also a loss, leaving them irrevocably changed. The intimacy forged in shared terror and power, the raw understanding that had bypassed words and expectations, now hung in the air, a ghost between them. "It's over," Julian rasped, his voice hoarse, devoid of its usual crisp authority. He ran a hand through his ruined hair, his gaze fixed on Eldrin's inert form. A tremor ran through him, not of fear, Alistair realized, but of something far more complex. Revulsion, disbelief, and perhaps a flicker of pity for the man who had so thoroughly lost himself to madness. Alistair nodded, unable to articulate the sudden, profound sense of quiet that had descended. He looked down at his hands, still tingling with residual power, and then at the Blackthorn, which now pulsed with a soft, steady hum, no longer the hungry, malevolent thrum that had threatened to tear the Academy apart. The ancient artifact, once a source of terror and the catalyst for Eldrin's madness, now seemed merely dormant. It was sealed, certainly, its immediate danger averted, but its presence still resonated deep beneath Blackwood, a silent promise of lingering power, both light and shadow. Footsteps echoed in the corridor outside, growing louder, accompanied by urgent voices. Professor Thorn, his face grim, was the first to burst through the archive's door, followed by a cohort of Academy wardens, their wands at the ready. His eyes swept over the scene, Eldrin's unconscious form, the chaotic aftermath, and finally settled on Alistair and Julian, standing side by side amidst the wreckage. A flicker of something unreadable passed through his gaze. Relief, perhaps, but also a profound, weary understanding. "Alistair, Julian," Professor Thorn said, his voice grave. "Are you both unharmed?" "We are," Julian replied, his voice regaining a fraction of its usual composure, though it still held a raw edge. He pushed himself straighter, instinctively attempting to regain some semblance of his usual, impeccable self, but the effort was futile. The facade had been irrevocably shattered. Professor Thorn merely nodded, his gaze lingering on the Blackthorn, then on his son, and finally, on Alistair. Eldrin will be dealt with. The Academy will address this. But first, you both need rest. As the wardens moved to secure Eldrin, Alistair felt a strange lightness, a lifting of the oppressive weight he'd carried for so long. The revelation of his ancestors' destructive power, the terrifying echo of his own volatile magic, had, for a time, confirmed his deepest fears. He had seen himself as destined to repeat the mistakes of the past, a slave to a cursed bloodline. But facing Eldrin and choosing to fight alongside Julian, to use his chaotic power not for destruction but for defense, had shifted something profound within him. He had embraced his unique magic, not as a curse, but as a part of himself, raw and untamed. Yes, but also capable of immense purpose. He saw a path now, not to escape his legacy, but to understand it, to potentially redeem it. The burden of inheritance had not disappeared, but it had transformed, becoming a challenge rather than a condemnation. Julian, meanwhile, remained unusually quiet as they were led away, his usual aristocratic disdain completely absent. The shared vision, the agonizing intimacy of their linked magic, the desperate fight against Eldrin, it had all stripped away his carefully constructed defenses. He had seen Alistair's terror, his courage, his raw, unbridled power. And in turn, Alistair had witnessed Julian's unwavering loyalty, his quiet strength, his willingness to sacrifice everything for the Academy he loved, even for the Finchwood he claimed to despise. The animosity, Julian now realized with a startling clarity, had been a mask, a convenient shield for something far more profound, something he hadn't dared to acknowledge. The intensity of their connection, even in its absence, hummed beneath his skin, an undeniable truth. They were taken to the infirmary, where a stern but efficient healer quickly assessed their injuries. The physical wounds were minor, but the magical exhaustion was profound. As the healer bustled away, leaving them alone in the quiet room, an awkward silence settled between them. The emotional and physical intimacy forged in the crucible of battle, though the magical bond was severed, left an indelible mark. It was a chasm they had crossed together, and there was no going back to the way things were. "So," Alistair said, breaking the quiet, his voice raspy, "no more shared nightmares?" A sardonic smile, a familiar shield touched his lips, but it felt thin, fragile. Julian met his gaze, and for the first time, Alistair saw not the cold calculation or the icy contempt, but a raw, unguarded vulnerability. "No," Julian replied, his voice barely a whisper. "Only the echoes." He paused, then continued, his eyes searching Alistair's. I was wrong about you, about your family, about everything." Aster's sarcastic retort died on his tongue. Julian's admission, so unexpected, so genuine, disarmed him completely. He felt a warmth spread through his chest, a flicker of something he hadn't thought himself capable of feeling. "Hope and I," Alistair admitted, the words feeling strangely heavy yet liberating, "was wrong about you. I thought you were just the golden boy, blinded by tradition." A ghost of a smile, small and uncertain, touched Julian's lips. "Perhaps we both were. We were both just playing our parts." The Academy, Alistair knew, would be reeling from Eldrin's betrayal. The exposure of a revered professor, a guardian of Blackwood, as a radical who sought to unleash dark magic, would send shockwaves through its rigid structure. The old traditions, the strict hierarchy based on bloodlines and ancient feuds, would be called into question. It wouldn't happen overnight, but Eldrin's actions, and the combined efforts of a Finchwood and a Thorn to stop him, had undeniably planted a seed of change. The burden of inheritance, the weight of generations of animosity, might finally begin to lighten, allowing for a reevaluation of what truly mattered. Hours later, as the first rays of dawn painted the sky in hues of bruised purple and soft gray, Professor Thorn returned to the infirmary. He looked older, more tired, yet a quiet determination radiated from his stance. "Eldrin has been contained," he stated, his voice devoid of emotion. He will be stripped of his magic and his position, then imprisoned in the deepest wards beneath the Academy. He paused, his gaze sweeping over the two young men. The Blackthorn has been secured. Its power will remain dormant for now. "What about the Academy?" Alistair asked, his voice low. "What about us?" Professor Thorn met Alistair's gaze, a flicker of pride and sorrow in his eyes. "Blackwood will endure, but it will also change. Eldrin's actions have forced us to look inward, to question the very foundations we've built upon. The old feuds, the rigid adherence to bloodlines, they have proven to be vulnerabilities, not strengths." He turned his gaze to Julian. "My son, you have shown immense courage. You have honored your family in a way I never expected." Julian's jaw tightened, a hint of his old pride returning, but it was tempered by a newfound humility. "I did what was necessary, Father." "Indeed," Professor Thorn said, then looked back at Alistair. "You embraced your power, rather than letting it consume you. You chose a different path from your ancestor. That, I believe, is the greatest honor of all." He paused, a heavy sigh escaping him. "The magical bond between you two has been severed, as you know. The ritual Eldrin performed was broken when he fell, but the connection you forged, that will remain." Alistair felt the truth of his words deep in his soul. The magical link was gone. The emotional echo, the profound understanding that had blossomed between them, was a living thing. He looked at Julian, and Julian met his gaze, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. The rivalry was gone, replaced by something far more complex, a hopeful uncertainty. It was not love, not yet, but it was a foundation, built on shared sacrifice and a reluctant, undeniable respect. The path ahead for Blackwood, and for them, was uncertain. But, for the first time, Alistair felt a flicker of hope, a sense of purpose beyond cynicism. He had found his own power, and perhaps a reason to wield it. Months bled into a quiet autumn, painting Blackwood Academy in hues of ochre and rust. The frantic whispers of Eldrin's madness had faded, replaced by the rustle of dry leaves and the low murmur of academic discourse. Yet beneath the surface, a tremor of change persisted. The Academy, a stubborn beast of ancient stone and tradition, was slowly, reluctantly, stretching its ancient limbs, questioning the very hierarchy that had almost led to its undoing. Professor Thorn, his usual gravitas now laced with a weary determination, had initiated a series of reforms, challenging the archaic bloodline system and advocating for a more merit-based approach. It was a glacial shift, but a shift nonetheless. Alistair, surprisingly, had stayed. The thought of returning to Finchwood Manor, to the lingering ghosts of his parents' neglect and his own past failures, held little appeal. Here, amidst the crumbling grandeur of Blackwood, he found a perverse sense of belonging. He had traded his usual curriculum of ancient runes for a deeper dive into the Academy's restricted archives, a place Vivian Thorn now practically lived. He was determined, with a renewed, almost obsessive fervor, to truly understand the convoluted history of the Finchwoods and their twisted connection to the Blackthorn. The chaotic magic that still hummed beneath his skin, no longer a source of terror, felt like a compass pointing him towards a redemption he hadn't known he craved. His fingers, smudged with ink and dust, traced a faded inscription on a parchment detailing ancient Finchwood rituals. Vivian, perched on a precarious stack of tomes nearby, peered over her spectacles. "Another one about the ley lines, Alistair?" she asked, her voice a soft counterpoint to the rustling pages. "You're becoming quite the expert on ancestral self-sabotage." "Someone has to," he retorted, a flicker of his old cynicism returning. "And who better than the latest in a long line of practitioners? One besides," he added, glancing at her. "You're not exactly studying charms and social etiquette, are you, Vivian?" She offered a small, knowing smile. The truth, as it turns out, is far more compelling than superficial pleasantries. Suddenly, the heavy oak door creaked open, admitting a sliver of golden light in a familiar, imposing silhouette. Julian Thorn. He stood there, as impeccably composed as ever, though the usual icy edge in his blue eyes had softened, replaced by something more complex, more watchful. He still wore the Thorn signet ring, a symbol of a legacy he was still learning to redefine. The air between them, once thick with open hostility, now thrummed with a different kind of tension, a taut, almost magnetic pull that neither of them acknowledged with words, but felt in every charged glance. "Finchwood," Julian said, his voice a low, even tone. "Professor Thorn requires your presence in the headmaster's office. Something about the recalibration of the Blackthorn's wards." Alistair rose, brushing dust from his dark trousers. "And I suppose you're his personal errand boy now?" he drawled, unable to resist the familiar barb. It was a dance they still performed, a relic of their past, but the steps had changed, softened by the memory of shared pain and the unexpected communion of their magic. Julian's lips twitched, a ghost of a smile. "Someone has to ensure you don't accidentally unravel the entire academy with your unique approach to magic." His gaze lingered, a silent question passing between them, a recognition of the interwoven fates that had bound them together. The forced ritual had broken, but the connection, the profound understanding remained. A phantom limb of shared experience. The ancient feud between their families, a weight that had crushed generations, was not erased. How could it be? But a fragile truce had been established, not just between them, but rippling outwards, touching the very foundations of Blackwood. It was a truce built on mutual respect, on the shared sacrifice they had made to save the Academy from Eldrin's warped vision. They were not yet fully lovers, not in any conventional sense, but the unspoken promise of something deeper, something potentially transformative, hung in the air, electric and undeniable, as they walked through the hushed corridors, the scent of old parchment and damp stone filling the air. Julian spoke again. "The Blackthorn," he began, his voice dropping. "It's quiet, but it's not truly dormant, is it?" Alistair met his gaze, a grim understanding passing between them. "No," he confirmed. "It's waiting, and we, Thorn, are the ones who have to figure out what to do when it decides to wake up again." He knew their alliance was a delicate thing, forged in fire and necessity, but it was also a beginning. They were walking a precarious path, two opposing forces now aligned, ready to face whatever darkness lay ahead, together. The future of Blackwood, of their families, and of their own tumultuous hearts hung in that delicate balance, a constant, thrilling challenge. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story of Blackwood Academy, please give us a like and subscribe for more engaging stories. It will really help our channel grow.